Welcome to Haunted Horizons, where the unknown lurks just beyond the edge of reality. Tonight, we take you down a road that should not exist. A road with no name, no destination, and no way back. Some roads take you home. Others take you somewhere else. For those who take the wrong turn, they don't just disappear. They keep driving, forever. This is the Vanishing Road. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and remember, if you ever see a road you don't recognize, don't take it. Some roads take you home, others take you somewhere else, and once you take the wrong turn, you might never come back. Part 1. The Shortcut. David Carter had been driving trucks for 15 years. He'd seen it all. Long nights, lonely highways, fog so thick you could drown in it. But nothing compared to what happened on Route 190. It was supposed to be a simple job, a midnight haul through the Midwest. But a storm had shut down the main freeway, and his GPS kept rerouting him onto back roads. He was behind schedule, running on fumes and caffeine, when a new route appeared on his map. Alternate road, 5 miles ahead, no town name, no highway number, just a thin gray line cutting through an empty stretch of forest. He barely thought twice before turning onto it. That was his first mistake. Part 2. The Road That Doesn't End. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just another dark road surrounded by trees. But after 20 minutes, David started to notice the road wasn't changing. The same trees, the same faded road signs, the same old gas station on the right, the same gas station he'd already passed 5 minutes ago. He checked his GPS. No signal. His radio had gone silent too. Just a low, whispering static. His truck clock read 2:47 a.m. He drove for another 20 minutes. The clock still read 2:47 a.m. David's chest tightened. His fingers gripped the wheel. Something was wrong. Then, in the distance, headlights. A car approaching from the opposite lane. He exhaled. Finally, another driver. As the car got closer, he noticed something strange. The headlights looked off. They weren't white. They were a dull, sickly yellow. And they weren't beams. They didn't reflect off the pavement. They just glowed. As the car passed him, David turned his head to glance inside. The driver's seat was empty. The car continued down the road and disappeared into the mist. And then his headlights caught something ahead. A sign. One he hadn't seen before. One he wished he'd never seen. No exits. Keep driving. Part 3. The Figures by the Road. David's heart pounded. He slammed his foot on the gas, pushing his rig faster down the endless stretch of pavement. The sign had to be a prank, a trick of the fog. He just needed to keep driving. And then he saw them. Figures, standing on the side of the road. At first they looked like shadows cast by the trees, but they weren't. They were people, men, women, children, standing completely still, watching him pass. No movement, no expressions, just empty, lifeless faces. His foot pressed harder on the pedal. They weren't real. They couldn't be real. But as he passed another mile marker, he saw them again. Closer this time. And then, over the radio, through the static, a voice crackled through. You shouldn't have come here. Part 4. The Passenger. David didn't remember falling asleep. But suddenly, he was waking up. His head snapped forward, and he nearly lost control of the truck. The road was still in front of him. The mist still hung in the air. The figures, they were gone. His clock still read 2:47 a.m. But now he wasn't alone. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. A man, dressed in a dark suit, thin, pale, smiling. David couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The man turned his head slowly and said, in a voice that barely moved the air, "You're going the wrong way." David slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. When he turned back, the man was gone. But something had changed. The road signs were different now. They weren't warnings anymore. They were instructions. Don't look back. Keep moving. The next turn is your last. And then far in the distance, he saw it. An exit. Part 5. The final turn. David's hands were shaking. His gut told him the exit wasn't real, but he had no other choice. He pressed the gas, speeding toward it, his heart pounding louder than his engine. The moment he reached the exit, his truck veered off the road, and everything went black. Part 6. The road that keeps calling. David woke up in his truck, parked at a gas station. A normal gas station. People walking around, the sun rising in the sky. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. The clock read 6:15 a.m. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? He didn't know. But as he stepped out of his truck, he noticed something strange. His mileage tracker hadn't changed. His fuel gauge was still full, as if he'd never driven at all. And then behind him, someone cleared their throat. An attendant, old, wrinkled, eyes full of something he couldn't explain. The man glanced at his truck, then at David. "You took the old road, didn't you?" he muttered. David felt his throat go dry. "What do you mean?" The man shook his head. "Nobody takes that road twice." And as David turned back toward his truck, his radio crackled to life. "See you soon." The static swallowed the words, and then, knock, knock, knock. David never drove at night again. Part 7. The road never lets go. David never spoke about that night. He tried to forget, but the road didn't forget him. For months after that night, his dreams were filled with endless asphalt, fog creeping around his truck, and yellow headlights appearing in the distance. And the worst part? Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. The first warning. It started small. One night, while on a different route, he glanced at his GPS and saw something chilling. A new route suggestion. Alternate road. 5 miles ahead. The same road, the one that didn't exist. He ignored it, kept driving, told himself it was a glitch. Then, 2 nights later, his radio came on by itself. Through the static, he heard a voice, a whisper. "You left something behind." David pulled over, his hands shaking. He turned off the radio, unplugged it, but the voice was still there. "Come back." He slammed his hands over his ears and drove as fast as he could. But no matter how far he went, he could still hear the knocking. The second warning. David quit trucking, sold his rig, moved to a city, took a desk job. He didn't care about the money. He just wanted to be far away from the road. For a while, it worked. The nightmares faded, the whispers stopped. But then, one morning, he received a package at his doorstep. No return address, just a plain envelope. Inside, a single photograph. It was taken at night, from the side of a highway, a road stretching into the dark, fog rolling in. In the distance, barely visible under the mist, a truck. His truck. And underneath, written in shaky handwriting, "We never let go." The final warning. David stopped sleeping. Everywhere he went, he started seeing yellow headlights in the distance. Once, he was walking home late at night and saw a car parked across the street. An old rusted sedan with dull, glowing headlights. When he blinked, it was gone. Another time, he was in his office break room, drinking coffee, when he glanced at the TV playing the news. The screen flickered. For less than a second, he saw it. The road, and a message flashing across the screen. "You are still driving." David stumbled back, his breath shaking. It was trying to pull him back. And then, one final sign. Late one night, he was walking home when he passed a gas station. A familiar one. He froze. It was the same gas station from that night, the night he escaped. Except he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near it. It was thousands of miles away. David turned, ready to run, but he saw a man standing by the pumps. The attendant, the old man who had warned him never to take that road twice. And this time, the man wasn't looking at David. He was looking past him, at something over his shoulder. David turned. And there it was, the road, waiting for him. The asphalt stretched into the endless mist, headlights glowing in the distance. The figures stood along the side, motionless, silent. David's breath hitched. His radio in his pocket crackled to life one last time. "See you soon." Then, knock, knock, knock. Part 8. The final drive. David knew he had run out of time. The road had found him again. And this time, it wouldn't let him go. He could feel it, the weight in the air, the static humming in his ears, the headlights that weren't really headlights glowing in the distance. The knocking had started to follow him everywhere. At work, his desk phone would ring, but there was only silence. At night, he heard the knock-knock echo from inside his apartment walls. And then, the final sign. His phone vibrated. A text message. "We're waiting." David didn't remember making the decision. He just knew what he had to do. He got in his car, started driving. The roads blurred together until there was only one. The one that never ended. The last turn. Fog swallowed the sky. The world outside his windshield looked unreal, stretched and endless. His dashboard clock flickered. 2:47 a.m. He gripped the wheel, heart pounding. It was happening all over again. The road stretched forward. No signs, no exits, only the glow of his headlights against the mist. Then, movement. The figures were back, standing along the roadside, watching, waiting. David didn't slow down. He knew now they were never real. Or maybe they were once, just like him. And then, up ahead, a truck. His truck, the driver that never left. David's breath caught in his throat. He knew that truck. He had driven that truck. But he was here. So who was behind the wheel? The headlights flickered as the other truck pulled alongside him, matching his speed. He turned his head and saw himself, his own face, expressionless, hollow, staring straight ahead. The David in the truck turned his head and smiled. The radio crackled. "You were always meant to come back." David slammed the brakes. The truck beside him did the same. His headlights illuminated a road sign up ahead, one he had never seen before. Last exit. He had seconds to decide. The wheel shook under his grip. This was it, the final choice. He could stay, or He could leave, but he knew if he missed this exit, he would never see another. David took a breath. Then, with all his strength, he yanked the wheel. The road that remains. David woke up in a hospital. Broken ribs, a concussion. They told him he crashed into a guardrail on an empty stretch of highway. They found his car upside down in a ditch. But the strange part? His truck was never found. When he asked where the accident happened, the doctors hesitated. There was no road where they found him. David didn't argue. He just nodded. He knew better than to ask questions, because when he closed his eyes, he could still see the headlights. He could still hear the knocking. And deep down, he knew the road wasn't gone. It was still out there, still waiting for the next driver to take the wrong turn.